Have you ever wondered what the Wild West was really like? Movies and TV shows paint a picture of fearless cowboys riding into the sunset, gold glittering in the rivers, and heroic gunfights at high noon. But the truth was far more complicated and much darker. Behind the myths and legends was a harsh world filled with greed, struggle, violence, and survival at any cost. Today, we step back into the 1800s to uncover the real history of the Wild West, the dark side of cowboys, the fever of the gold rush, and the bloody legacy of outlaws. It all began with the promise of fortune. In 1848, gold was discovered in California, and within months the news spread across the world. From the streets of New York to the harbors of China, people abandoned everything to chase a glittering dream. Families sold their homes. Men left their wives and children, and thousands began a dangerous journey westward. They traveled by wagon across deserts, through mountains and over rivers. Some even crossed oceans to reach America. Everyone believed that gold was waiting for them, just lying in the streams, ready to be picked up. But reality was merciless. For every man who struck gold, hundreds found nothing but hunger and exhaustion. The roads were littered with broken wagons, graves of travelers, and abandoned hopes. Disease spread through crowded camps. Food and supplies were scarce. Many died before they even reached California. And for those who survived the journey, life didn't get much easier. Mining was brutal work. Men stood waist-deep in freezing rivers, panning for tiny flakes of gold from sunrise to sunset. Their hands cracked, their backs ached, and their spirits broke. Few became rich. Most returned home with less than they started with. The gold rush also created towns overnight. San Francisco transformed from a small settlement into a booming city almost instantly. But these new towns were wild, chaotic, and lawless. Picture dusty streets filled with gamblers, fortune seekers, and outlaws. Saloons echoed with the sound of card games, fistfights, and gunshots. Justice was not served by courts, but by whoever carried the fastest gun. In some places, a man could lose his life over a single coin, a drink, or even a glance in the wrong direction. This was the true reality of the West. Danger at every corner, chaos behind every door. Among these towns rose the figure of the cowboy. Today, cowboys are remembered as heroes of American culture, symbols of freedom and rugged independence. But in the 1800s, their lives were far from glamorous. Cowboys were young men, often in their teens or early 20s, who worked on cattle drives. They spent long days under the burning sun, riding dusty trails for weeks or months at a time. They ate beans, bacon, and bread when they were lucky. They slept under the open sky, shivering through storms or sweating in desert heat. Their pay was small, and the work was dangerous. Cattle could stampede without warning. Snakes, wolves, and rustlers threatened them. A cowboy's life wasn't about duels in the street. It was about survival in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. But not all men of the West lived by honest work. Some chose another path, the path of the outlaw. These names still echo in history: Jesse James, Billy the Kid, Butch Cassidy, and the Sundance Kid. Too many, they became legends, rebels who fought against corruption and unfair systems. But the truth is darker. Jesse James was not a folk hero. He was a robber who terrorized banks and trains, leaving blood in his wake. Billy the Kid was not just a young gunfighter. He was a killer who lived by violence. Butch Cassidy may have been charming, but he led a gang that looted across states. For ordinary settlers, these men weren't heroes. They were nightmares. Imagine riding a train with your family, only to be surrounded by masked men pointing guns at you. Imagine working months to save your earnings, only to have them stolen in a single raid. The fear of outlaws haunted the frontier, and even when lawmen rose to fight back, the violence only grew. Shootouts, ambushes, and bloody revenge were part of daily life in the shadow of these so-called legends. Yet, Perhaps the darkest chapter of the Wild West doesn't belong to the cowboys or outlaws, but to the Native Americans. For centuries, tribes lived across the lands of the West. They hunted, farmed, and built communities tied deeply to the land. But as settlers moved westward, the tribes faced destruction. Promises made by the government were broken again and again. Treaties were signed, only to be ignored. Lands were taken by force, and tribes were pushed onto reservations. Conflicts erupted into wars, massacres, and unimaginable suffering. The expansion that promised freedom for settlers became tragedy for Native Americans. Whole cultures were shattered, voices silenced, and traditions lost. This was the price paid for the dream of the Wild West. At the same time, progress moved forward. Railroads stretched across the country, connecting east and west for the first time. But even railroads came with a cost. Chinese workers, who built much of the tracks through mountains and deserts, worked in deadly conditions for little pay. Many lost their lives, buried beneath the very lines that carried trains across the frontier. The West was growing, but every mile of progress was paid for in sweat, blood, and sacrifice. And then there was the myth. As the West slowly settled, stories began to grow, stories of brave sheriffs, daring cowboys, and noble outlaws. Writers published our novels filled with exaggerated tales. Later, Hollywood took these myths and turned them into larger-than-life movies. The West became romanticized, a place of honor and adventure. But beneath the myths was a harsher truth. The real West was built on greed, violence, and endless struggle. The heroes of the screen were often nothing like the men who lived and died on the frontier. Still, the Wild West shaped America. It was a place of risk and opportunity, tragedy and triumph. It showed the best and worst of human nature. The hunger for wealth pushed people beyond their limits. The fight for survival revealed courage and cruelty side by side. And the stories born from those dusty towns and endless plains still echo in American culture today. So the next time you picture a cowboy riding into the sunset, or an outlaw staring down the barrel of a gun, remember the reality. Remember the families who lost everything in the gold rush. Remember the cowboys who spent their lives working for a few dollars under the harshest skies. Remember the native tribes whose worlds were torn apart forever. And remember the truth that the Wild West was not just a place of freedom and adventure. It was also a place of shadows, where dreams came with a cost, and legends were written in both gold and blood.